Tonight on The Late Debate, why should tens of thousands of Londoners be paid to make even more to drive on our roads? We'll be asking the Mayor of London with just 4 days to go until the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone. Also on the programme, protecting our politicians. We look at MP security following the murder of Sir David Amess.
Some constituents will come to me because they have problems with different forms of the state. To hear that there will be police outside our surgeries would actually put them off coming.
In just a few days, the Mayor, Sadiq will take his biggest political risk since re-election, the expansion of London's ultra-low emission zone. Making it more expensive to drive in London is part of his plan to tackle toxic air. But not everyone's convinced. There have been criticisms of the scrappage scheme, while London's Tories have even called for a year's delay because of the pandemic.
I therefore declare Sadiq Amman Khan elected as the Mayor of London.
6 months ago, Sadiq Khan won a second term in charge at City Hall. The formal signing-in ceremony was at London's Globe Theatre, where he promised to build bridges with the government.
It's important that the Prime Minister and myself work closely together. We have in the past.
High up in the Mayor's in-tray was the knife and gun violence which has claimed the lives of 25 teenagers in London this year, and persuading reluctant Londoners to take up the COVID vaccine.
As long as you've got an arm, you can get a jab.
London's post-pandemic recovery was an important priority for City Hall, but when the government began to relax the rules, the Mayor broke ranks. He insisted masks must still be worn on tubes and buses.
When you're in London, it's really important to wear a face mask.
Sadiq Khan was finally able to open the delayed extension to the Northern Line, but has yet to reach an agreement with ministers on a long-term funding solution for Transport for London. Next week will see his biggest gamble yet, extending the ultra-low emission zone from central London to all roads within the north and south circulars.
What we're saying to the Mayor is just pause, right? London is coming out of a COVID pandemic. Take a year, pause, reflect, suspend the implementation of the ULEZ so that we can get it right and so that those poorest Londoners and those small businesses can be supported with a fully funded scrappage scheme.
But on Monday morning, an estimated 100,000 car drivers could find themselves having to pay £12.50 a day to drive in the new zone. To discuss that and other issues, I'm joined in the studio by the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan. Welcome. First of all, what do you say to car owners in parts of London that haven't had the ULEZ before, who can't afford to buy a new car, but now have to pay to comply with your rules?
Well, the air in London is toxic. You can't see it, but each year more than 4,000 Londoners die prematurely because of this toxic air. There are children whose lungs are permanently stunted and deformed because of the toxic air, and adults with a whole host of health issues, from asthma to cancer, from dementia to heart disease. What we've shown with the ultra-low emission zone in the central London part is just in 2 years' time we managed to reduce the toxic air by 50%. So this expansion up to the north and south circle will lead to more Londoners breathe in clean air, which is really important.
I think you've made the case for cleaner air, but still people can't afford to buy new cars. It's a very expensive proposition. You couldn't persuade the government to give you the money for a scrappage scheme for everyone. Do you owe these people who are going to start forking out money an apology?
Well, here's the good news. Even though the government have forgotten London, I haven't. So we've got a £61 million scrappage scheme. And so far,
but it's very limited.
What our scrappage scheme has done is taken more than 12,000 cars off our road. Compare our scheme with the Birmingham scheme, taken 200 cars off the road. We've taken 12,000 off. The scheme is still open, so any low-income family or any charity can apply for
only
the scheme.
Low-income families, isn't it, and charities? It's not open to everyone.
Well, we're trying to help those who need our help, and we're quite keen to make sure the poorest Londoners who suffer the worst consequences of this toxic air get to breathe clean air. And here's the thing about the expansion. 6 out of 10 Londoners who live in the expanded area don't even own a car. So this is an issue of social justice. And I've got to be frank, you know, the Conservatives have been consistent. They've been consistently opposed to our policies to clean up the air. I'm not willing to either kick the can down the road or to put my head in the sand.
What about using the money from the income from fines and the new charge to set up your own scrappage scheme that's available to everyone in the year or so ahead?
We have got our own scrappers scheme.
A bigger one that's more, that includes everyone, not just lower paid and charities.
It's the £6 million London scrappers scheme that we've got. The monies that come in from the ultra emission zone are actually quite limited. Why? Because most Londoners are doing the right thing. You know, when I first announced this policy, at the date of it in February 2017, roughly speaking, 37% of cars were compliant. Now it's more than 80%. So the good news is Londoners are choosing to walk, cycle, use public transport and make sure their vehicle is ULEZ.
If it's that successful, are you tempted to expand it to the whole of Greater London?
Well, the good news is the modelling we've done shows the expansion to the North and South Circular starting from Monday will lead to the air across London being cleaned up. We estimate over the course of just the next few months there'll be a 30% reduction in NOx. We've already seen a 50% reduction in central London. So a good example of policies from a politician making a positive change.
Are you tempted to expand it to the whole of Greater London?
Well, let's wait and see what the results are.
So it's a possibility.
Expansion. We've always got to evolve and adapt our policies to make sure we address the current challenges. The current crisis our city faces is an air quality crisis. What we don't want to do is replace the COVID pandemic crisis with an air quality one. That's why we're responding to the crisis we face.
You've obviously take air quality very seriously. I imagine you hope it's going to be your legacy, but you've also faced criticism over the Silvertown Tunnel. Are you tempted to restrict traffic in that to electric and hydrogen only?
Well, here's the good news. We've got a solution to the current challenge faced in that part of London with the Blackwall Tunnel. The Blackwall Tunnel closes on average 700 times a year, leading to congestion, leading to poor quality air. We're going to make sure a new tunnel has a lane reserved for double-decker buses, 37 an hour, but it'll also be within the expanded ultra emission zone. So a good example of pragmatic policies finding a solution to a challenge we face, but also at the same time cleaning up the air, helping businesses and helping those communities.
I noticed you didn't answer that. You're not saying that you're not going to restrict the tunnel only to electric cars. Or...
Well, it's in the expanded ultra-low emission zone, so to
but
use the tunnel...
But even in the ultra-low emission zone, there's still the internal combustion engines using it.
Well, what we do know is ULEZ-compliant vehicles emit less nitrogen dioxide, emit less nitrogen oxide, emit less particulate matter, emit less carbon emissions as well. And that's one of the reasons why our policies are seen as world-leading around the world. One of the reasons why the world has elected me to be the chair of C40.
You mentioned that. C40 is, of course, the global organisation of cities which champion issues around air quality and global warming. You're going to COP26. What do you hope to achieve there? Well,
I spoke today to Rosamond, Kissy Deborah, whose daughter Ella tragically died, and the coroner said that air pollution was a material factor in her death. We've got to make sure the world leaders understand that we've got to target now the twin challenges of climate change and air pollution, but also to persuade national governments to be using cities and regions and mayors as allies, not adversaries.
Can I touch on a couple of other issues? Are you disappointed at how few Londoners are now wearing masks on the Underground and on buses?
Well, I came here using the Underground and the vast majority were wearing a face mask. I'd reckon 8 out of 10. But I'm concerned that because we can't use the police, British Transport Police, City of London Police and others to enforce the condition of carriage, fewer people are wearing the face mask than otherwise would. That's why I'm lobbying the government. Let's not wait for Plan B. Let's now back up the condition of carriage, give me the powers to pass a bylaw or bring back the national requirements so we can reduce the spread of this awful virus.
Are you worried that you're losing the battle to convince Londoners to wear masks?
I think what's happening is human nature as it is. Some people, because it's not backed up with enforcement, are choosing not to do so. The vast majority are. We've got to make sure as many who should be wearing the face mask are. We do know that actually when it's backed up with the police, British Transport Police, even more people wear the face mask. We also know the science tells us wearing a face mask is one of the ways you can reduce transmission and also reduces your chances of catching it.
You talk about enforcement. I saw British Transport Police officers on the platform at Earl's Court yesterday marshalling football fans, and they weren't wearing masks. Surely they need to set an example.
Well, British Transport Police officers, TfL staff do wear a face mask when they're supposed to. I can't speak about that particular case. What BTP Police can't do, I'm afraid, is enforce mask wearing. So what we're saying to the government is give our officers the powers to enforce wearing of a face mask, because what we do know is that the virus is going up.
The death of Sir David Amess, security is pretty close to home to you. You've had to live with full-time police protection. How does that affect you?
Well, firstly, I mean, my thoughts and prayers remain with Sir David's family. What is great about our democracy is whether you're the mayor, whether you're an MP, whether you're a councillor, you get to see constituents all the time. It's great. You mix and mingle, you have surgeries, open surgeries, you go door knocking and so forth. The problem with the increase in recent years of threats to politicians, but also, I'm afraid, 2 MPs being murdered, another one being seriously hurt, Stephen Timms, is that connection we have maybe lost. Health and security is awful.
What effect does it have on your mental well-being, having to be under police guard all the time?
Well, it does affect you. I mean, you can't decide to go to the corner shop because you've got to let the officers know in advance they're going to accompany you to the corner shop. I can't decide to go and see my mum, the spur of the moment, because the police need to be there in advance to make sure it's safe and all the rest of it. It's not why I came into politics, to receive police security. I understand the advice from the experts. My worry is, Simon, it may deter others from becoming a politician, because why would you?
Would it make you think twice about running again?
Had I known when I first embarked on a career being a public servant that it would involve this level of threat, this level of protection, I'd think twice.
I'm sure you're not going to give me the answer that we'll probably find out in 2.5 years' time, but will you run again?
Listen, I'm thoroughly enjoying being the mayor. I feel humbled at the record result we got in this May. I'm just looking forward to delivering. This Monday, with the expansion of ULEZ, is another example of a promise made, trying to clean up the air, promise delivered.
Sadiq Khan, thank you for coming to join us. Now, the killing of Sir David Amess has thrown the everyday risks our politicians take into the spotlight, as Sadiq Khan has just shown. The MP for Southend was stabbed at his weekly constituency surgery, where members openly invite people to meet them face to face. But how do MPs serve their constituents without it happening again?
Morning.
Like most Londoners, Bel Ribeiro Addy uses public transport to get around. Even wearing a mask, the MP for Streatham gets recognised, usually by passengers who just want to say hello. She tries not to let her guard down.
I suppose if I'm not safe on the bus, then I'm not safe anywhere. So I'm happy getting on the bus. I am just a bit more cautious. I'm a bit more alert as to what's going on around me, definitely.
Bel Ribeiro Addy has experienced abuse from members of the public, both in her current job and her last one.
I used to work for Diane Abbott, who's the most abused member of Parliament. I used to see what came into her inbox. I used to see how people would treat her when we were outside, and that is enough to scare you.
2 days ago, Michael Gove was targeted by activists opposed to vaccine passports as he walked along a street in Westminster. On this occasion, the police reacted swiftly to ensure the Levelling Up Secretary came to no harm. Sir David Amess was killed during a constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea. Details of the meeting had been shared on Twitter.
I certainly think MPs should refrain from advertising their whereabouts in advance on social media. The community is different. Advertise it in the traditional way, put leaflets through doors. OK, it's hard work, but at the end of the day, I like the old traditional way of campaigning, and so did David.
With MP security under review, one idea floated in the wake of the attack on Sir David is for police officers to be on duty at constituency surgeries. Bel Ribeiro Addy isn't keen.
Some constituents will come to me because they have problems with different forms of the state, be it through their, the DWP or the local council or immigration, for example. To hear that there will be police outside our surgeries would actually put them off coming.
But some changes in the way MPs operate in their constituencies seem likely. To discuss those issues, I'm joined by Siobhan McDonagh, the Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden, for the Conservatives by the Kensington MP Felicity Buchan, and from another studio because of social distancing by the London Assembly Green Party member and former co-leader Sian Berry. Welcome all of you. Siobhan, you've been an MP since 1997. When you heard about Sir David, what went through your head?
I just felt so sorry for him and his family. I mean, he was a good guy. At the end of every session, there's a thing called an adjournment debate, and I'd always be there to talk about things in my constituency. And we would laugh indulgently with him and at him about making Southend a city, because he was always there and always doing it. And he was killed doing his job.
We're told that the police have contacted all MPs. Felicity, have you had a contact from the Met?
Yes, I've had a lot of contact from the Met and I've been very impressed over the course of the last week. David was a close personal friend of mine. He was chair of the all-party parliamentary group on fire safety, and because Grenfell Tower is in my constituency, we had so many dealings. So I was heartbroken and in shock.
Do you both think you've had enough support from the police?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's only so much support the police can give you, and, you know, just speaking for myself, and there are 650 MPs, so I don't want to pretend that I am speaking on behalf of anybody. I also kind of think the police do have other things to do, and I don't want to take up too much of their time.
Sian, you've stood for Parliament before. Does something like this put you off or make you think twice about standing again?
It doesn't, but it must make the job so much harder. I have so much sympathy for the MPs who've suffered 2 attacks like this, plus the attack on Parliament as well, and seen people around them being killed. It's an awful, awful thing. And we've been hearing too from the Mayor of London in recent days about the levels of protection he has to have because of threats to him as well. And I see that in City Hall as well. And it's such a horrific situation when being a politician is so much about speaking to people on the streets, being accessible to constituents and people you represent, to have these risks there and to have the solutions so not obvious. It's not easy to say that you want to have police at your surgery. I think, as the MPs on the film said, it's really hard to know what to do about this, but it is something that we must try to prevent because it is going to put some people off.
Felicity, have you had any thoughts about what you might want to see to make you feel safer?
Well, I am going to continue to meet constituents, but we have
Face to face?
Yes, we will do a combination of virtual meetings and, if needed, face-to-face. But we have to be prudent and we cannot just ignore what has happened. We have to be very sensible.
Without wishing to ask you about personal security measures, do you think you've got enough protection?
Yes, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what more you could do. I mean, we have a British system where we are MPs for a constituency and our job is to represent people, and people expect us to do that in a more deep way and consistent way than ever before, and it's the part of the job I love.
Well, now coming up in the next couple of weeks, we've got both the budget and COP26. Sian, obviously climate change, environmental matters matter to you as much as any of the others here, but what would you like to see on the green issues in the budget?
I think if we look at the government's priorities, we don't want to be looking at what they say, we want to be looking at where they put their money, and the budget is going to be absolutely crucial. The announcements this week about the heat and building strategy, 450 million to change away from gas boilers, that's 90,000 homes when we've got something like 20 million leaky homes that need treatment. In London, we've looked at this at the London Assembly, there's 3.5 million homes, almost all of which need some form of treatment to get to net zero. There's tens of billions needed just for our city, and this isn't coming from government yet. We need to see a step change in investment, a real Green New Deal of the sort that we've been calling for many years now. And if we got on with this before, we'd be far ahead of the starting point. We'd have to spend less per year getting this sorted out. Plus, we'd have fewer people living in fuel poverty, facing what I think is going to be a really hard winter.
Felicity, can the government, after spending billions on COVID, afford to go green?
Well, absolutely, we need to go green, but what I would say very, very strongly is that this is not only about government investment, this is about private sector investment too. And by giving seed capital, we're expecting £90 billion of private sector investment to come into green projects. And we've done this before. If you look at offshore wind, we have attracted a remarkable 100 billion of private sector investment. And as a result of that, we've gone from 40% coal to 1% coal. And I'm incredibly proud of this government's record on the environment. We have decarbonised at the fastest rate of any G20 country. We've reduced emissions by 44% since 1990, while growing the economy by almost 80%.
But still more needs to be done, doesn't it, Siobhan?
Oh, always more needs to be done. But like in every challenge, there are opportunities. And so, as we've learnt with the vaccine, if the government can invest in new batteries for electric cars, look at the whole electric cars issue, and the things that the heat pumps to make them better and more efficient, then not only do we green our economy, but we also provide more and better jobs and bigger and better bits of our economy. So there are opportunities here if we're canny.
Can we talk about COVID rates? Are you in favour of Plan B being put on hold?
I do not think that we should be activating Plan B at the moment. I am very much so encouraging all of my constituents to get their booster jab. What is very different this year from last year is that we have had a successful vaccination programme, and it's very important that we keep that up. I know that there's been a lot of talk in Parliament today about wearing masks, and I would say in crowded public places it makes sense.
Are you happy to wear one in Parliament?
Well, Parliament is a workplace, and what I would say is if you look at Scotland and Wales that have mandated masks everywhere, their rates are actually higher than ours in England. So I do think that COVID is something that we need to treat incredibly seriously, but it is endemic and we need to learn to deal with it.
Sian, are you confident that you're going to have a normal Christmas?
I'm incredibly worried about the levels of infection that we're seeing, particularly just at a time when a lot of the vaccines are waning in their efficiency in individual people. Now, we've waited every single time until it's too late to bring in new measures. I think just for once it would be great to have some caution, some extra measures, some extra advice to people so that we can get in ahead of another surge. Otherwise, I'm really worried again about Christmas.
What example do you think MPs should set?
I think we should be wearing masks. It's not for our own safety, but to say that we recognise our responsibility towards others. You know, if you look at the problem that Sadiq has in London, where he can require people to wear masks on the tube and on the buses, but he can't enforce it. So I would say let's enforce Plan A properly before we start thinking about Plan B. There's a real issue about the rollout of the vaccination in schools and the top-ups.
Siobhan, thank you very much. And thank you to all my guests tonight, to Sadiq Khan, to Siobhan, Felicity and Sian. I'll be back next month with another edition of The Late Debate. Until then, thank you for watching and good night.